Hello and welcome to today's episode of Absolutely Not. I am your host, Katrina Stroll. I'm a certified career coach and HR consultant who created this space because so many professionals out there have difficulty setting boundaries, and I want them to stop having difficulties doing so, myself included. So I bring resources onto the show so they can share their experiences with us so that we know that this is a practice thing that we can do every single day in environments, and we know when we can't practice it in what environments. Before we dive into today's topic, I like to define some words that we use frequently on the show. The first being boundary, something that indicates or fixes a limit. An example of a boundary would be recently I stopped or I deleted the Slack app on my phone. I know that's like a super huge thing, but now they can't contact me on my phone. Boo-hoo. Gaslighting, to manipulate someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. My special guest today provided me with an example of gaslighting. For instance, when you go up to your manager and say, hey, I'm concerned about this thing, and they ask you, okay, what was your involvement with that thing? Did you have something to do with that? Maybe that's why you're concerned about it. That's gaslighting. Dismissive, showing that something is unworthy of consideration. That same manager, if you go up to that manager and say, hey, this is still occurring, can we please have a conversation about this? And they say, go do your job or you're going to be fired. That's dismissive. Today's episode is entitled, My Authenticity is Not a Threat. I know, such a heavy title, but my special guest is going to go into why it's titled that today. And my special guest is Farzin Farzad. Yay! Oh, hold up. I know you have my notes up.
Thank you for having me.
He is a DEI practitioner with experience in higher education, local government, and the private sector, holding 2 master's degrees in international affairs and diplomacy, as well as a certificate in conflict resolution skills. Farzin leverages his unique academic background, extensive travel experience, and experimental knowledge to provide comprehensive, thought-provoking, local, global approaches to DEI work. Farzin is the owner and principal of Critical Equity Consulting LLC, a boutique DEI consulting firm focused on helping organizations rebuild with a primary focus on creating equitable outcomes. Yay! Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me. I was really excited for this, so looking forward to the conversation.
I'm so very excited. And as I said, I'm excited because of the title alone. Could you talk about why this is entitled My Authenticity is Not a Threat?
Yeah, I think when we were having our conversation, it just kind of flowed naturally. And I mean, it's something that I've been thinking about pretty much all of my life in whatever space I kind of enter. It's that this sort of immediate othering and like the extra amount of energy you have to put into proving yourself, whereas others don't. So I think that like if I'm going to be viewed as a threat, then I should have a stake in that, right? Like so to kind of have that societally appointed to you is troublesome and problematic. Takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of toll on your big toll on your mental health. And so I think this is really important because it goes to speaks to a lot of things that society does to you, where you have less control over it, right? Like so you can build the trust, you can build the sort of connections where people kind of view you less as a threat, but the damage is still there, and the damage is already done, right? So it's just it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of sort of momentum from what you need to do in that given moment, and then it puts it and it puts you in a situation where you have to work extra hard to build trust, and you have to it's just a lot of work that you shouldn't have to do, right?
I hated that answer very much. And I hated it because just reminded me of everything I've had to do my entire life. It's just work harder. And I've been told that since I was a child. And I think a lot of people that kind of grew up similar to us or had the same ideals kind of implanted in us at a very early age, we don't learn about boundaries early in our life. It's just something that's not really taught to us. When did you start learning about boundaries, or is this the first time you've talked about boundaries?
This is the first time I'm talking about boundaries. I actually learned about boundaries later in life. I mean, I come from a culture where, like, it's that, and because of, my parents being immigrants and kind of being kind of exposed to a lot of these things. Like what I grew up is like, you do work harder. You do go the extra mile, and like, you just kind of don't worry about the problems. You just tough it out and keep going and going and going. And so like, and I mean that, I don't want to stereotype and say like that's the entire immigrant experience, but for my background and my family, I think there was that sort of mentality coming in where, like, there's no there's no concept of this might affect your mental health. I had no idea what that. I mean, even though like my father's a psychiatrist, right? Even that, like, it was everything for him was specifically with name disorders that you can find in the DSM. Back then it was like 4 or something, I can't remember. But like there was no concept of well-being associated to this, right? So yeah, I mean, I learned about boundaries later in life, and I had a few great, I think, in the middle and like my late 20s, I guess. I had a few great mentors that kind of were like, you can do this, right? You don't have to say yes to everything. Because I found myself like saying yes a lot and getting frustrated and just, I don't know what to do. Like I overcommitted and all this stuff. So no, it was later in life. No, I want to say probably not mid to late 20s. I want to say late 20s to early 30s is when I kind of started discovering that, you don't have to, you can take control over your own schedule and just life trajectory, I guess. So
And I love that at least you learned the lesson. A lot of us are still learning the lesson now. The part where you said, you can do this, you can take control of your own schedule. A lot of that was me kind of thinking about when I had difficulty setting boundaries. I was thinking about, who do I ask permission for this? Who do I get the okay on this? I mean, I grew up in a very Samoan household, and I went immediately into the military. So it's very like, you need to ask somebody to do something with your life.
Yeah.
Was your life pretty similar?
Yeah, I mean, like I very similar, because I never had those like sort of experiences growing up to no, I mean, nobody told me these things, right? So like, even though like I was reading all sorts of philosophy about like empowerment and like, liberation of, I never like, it never clicked that I can do that for my own life. Like I always viewed it in like, like revolutionary kind of groups taking arms and fighting powers and stuff like that. And so, because I mean, I studied a lot of that stuff, but then, it clicked after a while that like, you can take command of your own labor as well. It's not, it's not like completely in the realm of these abstract concepts or like, these historical things. Like that applies to you too. Like you are a part of society, you are a part of history. And like if we as individuals decide, like adopt this mentality, then collectively we can achieve these things. So if we're in a place where like, you know, we've kind of been indoctrinated and propagandized to like consistently um, give more of ourselves to our employers and others, um, because that's what society tells us, right? You know, we see all these like, I mean, you know, the things that when I first started in the workplace, like the things that were like, you know, popular to say were like, I'm the first one to enter and the last one to leave, and all these things, like just like overwork, you know, you're overworking yourself, and that is a virtue. And then, like, you know, I believed it, right?
Mhm.
um and also, like, you know, nobody told me otherwise when I was young. But like after a while, like, you know, as with you know, like I said, I had a few people that really told me that, you know, you can do this, and it clicked. After a while I realized, like, wow, like what am I, like, you know, is like this job, you know, isn't really, it's not, I'm not a first responder, I'm not, you know, it's not a life or death situation where um I have to be there. The work can wait. And even if you're in those situations, you still need rest, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure, um, you know, you can speak to that much better than I can, but like, you can't, you have to, you know, take ownership of your own life, your own labor, your own time. You know, that's important to you. That's important to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone in the room. I just want to repeat the part where you said giving more of yourself to your employer. It's very visual for me. It just imagined myself giving like my entire body to my employer and just me having like my hand and then they get like the rest of my body. And that's pretty crazy because that's what most of us do, or what we were indoctrinated. Like, this is what work is. You do the 40 to 45 hours a week and you just be happy at 48
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, to add to that, like, you know, we have this view in this country of labor being like there's a very paternalistic view of our jobs. Like, we even use the term job creator to describe people who, you know, are essentially employers, right? And think how much power is in that. Like, you know, yeah, it's so paternalistic. It's almost like this job is a gift, and be happy with it and do whatever I tell you to, and just shut up and keep going, right?
Mhm.
Um, Whereas, you know, you look at other places and they have a very healthy view, some other places, not everywhere. They have a much more healthy view of labor. Like, you know, you have a need, I can fill that need with my skills, you know, and my work product, and it's a mutual exchange, right?
Mm.
Whereas like here, it's just so like, it's like a job is a gift, or, and you're like, no, like I'm, you know, I'm working, you know, I'm selling my skills, and I expect adequate labor, adequate compensation for that labor,
Mhm.
right? I expect it's a mutual exchange, right? We have to adopt that mentality. Otherwise, like, we're still continuously just, oh, like, I gotta keep this job. I gotta keep this job. Like, they gave me the job. It's, you know, if I lose it, like, I'm gonna lose everything. Yeah, I mean, you know, of course, a lot of places, unfortunately, you still have to do that practically. But like, the more we move away from that sort of paternalistic view where your employer has all the power in the situation, um, the better we are. And that requires collective social safety nets, right? So the more safety nets we have, the more we can, you know, not job hop, but, you know, find new work in things that are more suitable for us, right? Um, so I think there's a societal responsibility there as well. So yeah.
And I love that you use the word what we're expecting, because I use the word expectations a lot on the show. And when you go into positions or new employers and you don't really have high expectations, then they show you that. They're like, okay, cool, your expectations are dirt. We'll just treat you like dirt. Have you ever had an experience like that before?
Expectations from the
Yeah.
employer.
Yes, very low. Just very,
Um, I don't know. Like, low expectations, maybe not so much.
maybe very high expectations.
I mean, I don't know, like, well, from the employer side, it's always been unreachable
Mm,
expectations. For me, it's always, I do, I'm so like, I've been, I mean, this is historic, like, because of my, I mean, my bad experiences, but I'm always like a little, like, when I enter a new work environment, I'm always like a little kind of hesitant. So I'm not, I don't like, I try not to get like enamored by the show, right? Like, I mean, you have your honeymoon period, you have like the cool perks and everything, but I'm always like, because of these past experiences for me, I always enter a situation. I'm like, okay, they got this, that's cool. What's hiding in the back, right?
mm,
What's gonna pop out, later, and just kind of ruin it all, right? Like, what kind of behaviors exist? I don't care about the foosball table. I'm more worried about the interpersonal interactions and my relationship with my supervisor, and the distance to leadership, and my
mm.
own personal trajectory, right? Like, because you know, I mean, I have myself in the past been sort of dazzled, in the outset. Yeah.
Oh, and when you went into those dazzling environments, did you have strong boundaries or were you just learning about boundaries?
I think then I was learning about boundaries more
Mm,
so than, but I mean, even if you do have, even if you're a good boundary setter, it's like those environments on the outset are designed to kind of wow you. So you
mm,
kind of, you break your walls down immediately, right? And
mm,
I mean, in most situations, that's a good thing. But if the I mean, I'm using this term deliberately, and but if the intention of the workplace is to exploit you, they're gonna dazzle you in the beginning, and then if, like, 3 months, 4 months, even sometimes a year later, you're gonna realize, wow, like, I am working 60, 70 hours a week. I didn't realize I was doing this. I didn't realize, I mean, this was gonna happen. Then you start to internalize that yourself. You're like, well, how did I get here? What did I do was I saying yes too much? Like, and then you get in your own head, and then, it's like it's a reinforcing thing. So, um, but yeah, what was the question? Sorry, guys.
You're okay. Well, I have a new question now. What would you say to those people that are in or have entered dazzling environments and starting to realize, oh, it is not that dazzling here? What would you say to them? What would the next steps be? They're starting to see the red flags and the disco ball has faded.
Well, I think it's important to start kind of, I mean, even jotting it on paper, right? Just so you can
Mhm.
assess it down the road. So when you start seeing problematic behaviors, um, the natural thing is to kind of be cautious and not say anything, right? If you're in a new environment, you don't want to speak out as much, right? So, um, you know, there's this great infographic that's floating around on the internet. I think it's called the quote problem of the women of color in a nonprofit, and it basically, and profit problem is like, what is it? What are these? Is it? No, it's not parentheses.
Quotations.
Quoted. Well, how?
Yeah, okay.
It's in quotations. So, um, anyhow, like, it shows you, like, how typically people of color, especially women of color, enter the work phase or workforce in a given situation. There's a honeymoon period. Then they start, that kind of starts, fading away, and then they see certain things happening, and then, the workload is increasing beyond that other duties is assigned is becoming, bigger and bigger. um, and then, you're confronted with two choices: either put your head down, don't say anything, survive, or say something and then risk the organization and all its parts kind of coming back at you. You say something, that happens, you get even more frustrated, and you either retreat into yourself or you leave, right? So, That happens quite a bit. So when you're entering in an environment like that, I think it's very important to not dismiss like your experiences. I think we have a tendency to be like, oh, like, you know, that's just one thing. And then that one thing because, oh, that's another thing. That's another. And then just so like, you know, take notes, right? Take notes of your experience. Um, you know, if you're feeling comfortable, raise it with your supervisor. If you don't feel comfortable with your supervisor or their supervisor, you can always go to, you know, HR. Unfortunately, a lot of places, HR isn't an arm of. Um, it's more of an arm to protect the organization than it is to. That's not everywhere. I mean, some places are very progressive, but these are all assessments you have to make, and so um, so like, you know, if you're in a position where you realize, you know, this place is not for me or even toxic, um, you have decisions to make, right? So
Mm,
you have to worry, you know, there's and this is why there's a lot of no-win situations in these things. And so no one has it right? Like you're not gonna no one's figured out the secret sauce to entering a toxic work environment and thriving there, right? You're one person, you're not gonna change a system most of the time. So but so I will so we have to
acknowledge that. Yeah.
yeah, but like you know, you tend to test out the waters. You say something, you gauge the response of your HR or your supervisor, and then if they take it seriously, then that builds trust, right? You
Mm,
build trust in your organization, and it makes you want to stay. But if you know they do your typical micro invalidation, like, oh, I'm sure they didn't mean to say that, and they're protecting the, you know, the sort of dismissive behaviors, you know, you mentioned in the beginning. Um, so then you know, you have that decision to make. Like, am I going to stay here? Is it worth it for me to stay here?
mm,
What period of time can I tolerate this until, you know, I apply and find um, new work? I think these things are doubly like difficult or even exponentially difficult um, for people who are from marginalized backgrounds, right? Typically historically marginalized backgrounds or other communities, you know, because you can't just easily transition into a new work environment. You know, if you have you got to put food on the table for your family. You have a lot of responsibility, and you know the job search process is not as easy for you. There's so many more barriers, right? So it's so much harder, right? And these are systemic issues. I mean, to no fault of your own. I think um, we should make sure that we put that out there. Like these are societal and systemic issues, and don't internalize it. Like
mm,
don't don't take into don't try and clean up a toxic workplace, and don't try and fix society. Do what you can incrementally. I mean, obviously, like I'm all for intervention. I'm all for change. As my entire life is focused on like trying to, you know, change these systems. But but yeah, I mean, you have decisions to make. So I would start recording everything. I would, you know, speak out if you feel comfortable. Um, but if it's really problematic, um, you know, you can leave. There was one last thing that I will say. There's a lot, I mean, thankfully there's a lot more accountability in
mm,
society now than I've ever experienced in my entire lifetime. I mean, people are on Twitter, people are on Facebook, you know, like trashing these companies for doing things. And so there is a little bit of leverage there. And recently I had a conversation with Netta Jenkins, who um, starting this platform called Dipper, and it's sort of like Glassdoor for people of color, to
mm.
kind of talk about the workplaces. So more options are available to you. I mean, to do these things, and but still, it's tough. But I've been talking for.
You're okay. It's so very insightful. I appreciate you sharing this knowledge with us. Um, One of the phrases that you used was you have a decision to make. So anybody who's listening to this conversation, although there's a lot of um societal reasons and systemic reasons as to why it's going to be very hard for you to make that decision, he still said, when those red flags pop up, when you start making that list, there's a decision that needs to be made, and that decision lies with you. In setting these boundaries, you are ensuring that you're able to make a very sound decision. Because if you just kind of internalize things that's going on around you, or just kind of dismiss them within yourself, you're just allowing these things to kind of pass through and not really getting the information and data you need from the organization. So yeah, it sounds like you're able to set boundaries pretty easily. When was the last time you had to set a boundary with someone at work?
I'm good at talking about it. I don't know if I'm good at actually doing
Okay.
it. I struggle with it too, right? I am the type of person that does sort of overcommit, right? Like, I always want to, I always want to provide like my voice and sort of, like, what can I do? Like, and so I think it's, I'm still learning, right? This was introduced to me 10, 15 years ago, and well, a lot more actually, 15, 20. Um, yeah. So like I'm still like learning these things, and so and like kind of figuring out like exactly a process for it is, is becoming something for me. So like some of the things that I've learned to do over time is like, you know block out portions of your calendar, like, right, like just make sure that like people know that you don't, you just no, I don't have availability at this time because I have all these other things. And honestly, uh if you are like me, like where you want to kind of get involved in like just help and stuff like that, if you're overcommitting, how can you possibly be like do good work, right? Like your mind is in all different directions. Like you want to concentrate and focus on one thing at a time and do one thing really well, right? Like so one or a couple things, right? So there's that, but it's also important to recognize, we were talking about entering the environment. So it's a good idea to have some good questions lined up when in the interview, get a sense for the organization before you enter. You know, read the Glassdoor reviews. If people are like, there's no boundaries, people are overworked here, that's a decision you have to. But yeah, I think I'm learning myself. And so I think there is some beauty in a process. So like kind of think of ways of actually um, really doing this, like block out your calendar and commit to it, and then and so be comfortable with saying no. Be comfortable with the idea, and saying no doesn't mean you don't care, right? It's just that I don't have the time for this at this very moment. Maybe in the future I can. Um, and so there's a lot of things like that where you can take ownership of your own schedule, take ownership of your own time, and that's super important, you know, both to you and the people that need you, right? So
And they do need you, but they need you at 100%, not 5% of whatever time I have left because I said yes to a million things. I love that you touched on the questions that you should be asking in the interviews. I myself have been sexually harassed in every single organization I've ever been a part of. So during interview processes, I ask about the sexual harassment policy and reporting process. It does throw a lot of hiring managers for a loop, but then I fucking know that you guys don't know what the hell you're doing when it comes to sexual harassment. Or if they say, oh, we don't have that here, I'm like, cool, you're lying.
no, you can really like if people get uncomfortable with those types of questions, you can really tell like what kind of environment you're about to enter.
Mhm.
So um yeah, I mean it's super important to kind of get that reading in the outset for your own, safety.
Right. For your own safety. Anyone who's listening or listening to this later, for your own safety. It's not to make that person uncomfortable. It's not to give them a difficult time during the interview. It's to ensure that you're going to be safe in that organization when you enter that door. Otherwise, you're just going to be checking out in, what was the dazzle time? 3 to 4 months. Yeah, dazzle.
Varies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't become evident till a year later,
Okay. But sooner or later, the dazzle time will end, and you'll just have to take that dazzle with you, I guess. But I'm so glad that you're still learning about boundaries. And so everyone in the audience knows, hey, this person is still learning about boundaries and still implementing processes where they can. Has anybody been helping you in growing in your boundaries to stand firmer in them?
I think my family, my wife, she's pretty good at it. And so she's been doing some coaching for me, and I think I'm the type of person that sort of wears his heart on his sleeve. Like I talk about myself too much, so like a lot of people have been sharing like their tips with me. Like a friend of mine just recently talked about like how they had to just cut off a client, because I'm in business for myself, and so literally they quote fired their client, right? And I was like, wow, you can do that. And so they're like, yeah. I mean, that's if it's not working out, you built it into the contract, right? So, and that's also very important. Like you were talking about the sexual harassment policy. Oh, like everything written is your go-to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you can reference, and but yeah. So that's sort of like, if it's not working out, like unless like you have to determine how obligated you are to continue the relationship, but yeah, so I think a lot of people have just been volunteering some of these things, but it's mostly been kind of my wife, because she has a much better understanding of the business environment, and so like like contracts and getting things on paper and defining boundaries in the outset, like even in your contract, right? You can if you're in business for yourself, and a shout out to Janelle Benjamin, who told me recently that she literally built in her time available in her contract. Like, I will not answer emails, or like don't text me, in like after like 5 p.m. or something like that. So I think that's very important. Like if it happens, like you're not obligated, right? And they raise a concern, like, yeah, it's in the contract. And so, yeah, and some employers make their employee handbooks public, so you can go in and read their policies and things like that. And, obviously, you want, if it's not there, you can ask for it in the interview, like you've done, and that's really smart and like to do, because those are the those are the foundational documents. That's what you're going to reference.
Oh man, I'm so glad that you have a support system around you and amazing people who are kind of giving you insights on how to set boundaries in your business. Has anyone helped you, or have you ever had to set boundaries when you weren't in your own business and when you were working with other people and had managers and such?
More less so in those situations. I don't think. I think we still. I mean, even when I worked in local government, there was still this sort of like this like hyper capitalist culture of just more, work more. This is a virtue and all this stuff, and so people were reluctant. Except a couple places that I worked in where. And the ones that I think of that told me to kind of do this were Black women, and so like, because like that doesn't exist in my culture as much, and so like it was kind of eye-opening, like to hear that. And like, this is, there's this cognizance of exploitation that these individuals had, that like I was sort of at that moment not aware to, and I was buying into all these like
Mhm.
flashy sort of like things that um, are like, even the rich dad poor dad stuff, and all this stuff about like bootstraps and overworking and working super hard, and you're running, you're a rat in a cage, right? You're just kind of doing this, that you're Sisyphus, you're pushing a boulder uphill forever. um, and so like, if you're in that situation, you don't owe anybody anything. You're selling your labor, right? Like, um, so like, or you don't owe not anybody anything, but you don't owe the organization much more than that mutual exchange that we were talking
Mhm.
about.
Oh man. And if for anybody listening, if you don't take anything else away from this, please take away his phrase, buying into, just being cognizant of what you're buying into. Even if you're still the rat in the cage right now, try to be more cognizant of it. Like, what cage are you in? Did you build the cage? Or do you own the rat in the cage? Like, see which parts of this system you're taking ownership of and where you can take ownership, because if you don't, then somebody owns that cage, somebody owns that rat, somebody owns that wheel, and yeah, they'll feed you when they can, I guess. That's awful. That is an awful.
We decide when your lunch break is.
Yeah, see, that's awful. Oh my gosh. So you have shared so much with us. If you could share the top 3 tips for professionals that are trying to get into the field that you've been in, or maybe starting their own business, for setting boundaries and just being more firm in yourself and true to yourself.
Yeah. So, one, I'm big on taking command of your own calendar, right? Like, blocking out certain times where you need time to de-stress, to think, um, and you don't owe anybody an explanation for that. And so, taking ownership of your calendar. Two, I think we talked about this as well, is like, in the outset, trying to learn as much about the work environment as you can before you're entering it. Um, get their sexual harassment policy, get their employee handbook, ask the questions. Um, and so, kind of get the sense for, like, how they're talking about employment, right? How they're talking about the job. Is it from a, like, the words that they're using, or the mannerisms that they have, is it coming from a place of power flowing down to you, um, or is it coming from a place of like, yeah, like, this is a mutual thing, like, we need people like you, and so there's like this understanding that, like, that you hold some power in this situation. The third thing I will say, I got some kind of not great advice at some point, where it was kind of like, if there's an opportunity, just take it. You can figure out the timing. Um, you can do that, and client projects will clash, and then you're faced with, what do I do? And then now you got to worry about, do I have the capacity to hire somebody, or like, what do I have to do? Like, I don't have the bandwidth to do these 2 or 3 things at once. um, be very like, I'm learning, like, the path to one of the best paths to boundary setting is understand your own schedule, and understand your own bandwidth within that schedule, and what you can and cannot do. Um, really plan ahead, right? Like, really get a sense for the future. And so, if and it's okay if they're like, we need this by this time, for you to be like, look, I have a lot of client responsibilities that those next few weeks, and then provide an alternate date. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? Like, I mean, um, I'm not gonna promise you that there's gonna be more work out there for you, but there probably will be. And so, it didn't work out this time. You've already built that relationship. If they're interested in you, then, they may come back. They most likely will come back to you. So really, I cannot stress this enough. Really understand your own calendar, right? Like really just plan things out, as much as humanly. But I'm not a planner at all. I'm whimsical when it comes to my future. So I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And then eventually, you overcommit. And then, like we were saying, you're not putting your 100% into any one thing, and you're just kind of divided. And what you set out to do, your impact is even lower, right? And it's not just like money. It's exchange of money. It's like the impact that you want to. Like everybody wants to have impact in their work, right? And your impact is declined. So your ability to make positive change is also diminishing there. So so plan it out months in advance. Really get a sense for the gaps of time you have and your ability to kind of do that, and then build in. And this is also important for businesses to build in unexpected things. So there might be a client that comes and says, something was wrong, like there's extra work that's got to be done. Obviously, you're going to bill them for it, but those kinds of few hours, maybe a week of just accounting for any sort of unexpected things that come up. So
nice. Very good tips. When you were talking about capacity and bandwidth, when people talk, I have like visions or pictures in my head, and all that popped in my head was careful Icarus. Because your capacity and your bandwidth, if your wax wings are too close to the sun, you're just gonna drop right out of the sky. Yeah, oh my gosh, I don't know why that popped in. As soon as you said capacity and bandwidth, yeah, drop right out of the sky. So that's awful. Try not to do that. Anybody who's listening, make sure that you are mindful and cognizant of your bandwidth and your capacity. I have a 3-year-old son right now. After 5 p.m., I cannot. I have to go do the kisses, the hugs, the mommy business that I have to do. And that's my capacity. That's my bandwidth. So yeah.
And don't schedule things back to back. I will say that's one thing I'm learning is I've done trainings, and then immediately I have okay, so after that training, we're going to go and do a brainstorming session on this one thing, like maybe a policy development, paper and stuff. Give yourself an hour or 2 hours or whatever, or schedule it for the following day, right? You're also going to be exhausted from those things, and you should when you're kind of doing this, you should understand that you're also building in time for your rest and recovery to be able to once again kind of as close to that 100% attention as you can, get into this thing. So I've when you have an open calendar, people I've been in places where calendars are open and people just schedule things oh, you have space here. So then I had to learn literally even in half-hour increments, not available. You also don't know if things go over, but you're not 40-hour work week. You are not obligated to be in meetings for 40 hours. You have to build in time to do the work, work, right? Desk work. Otherwise, you're going to do that after hours. And so that's also important.
Right. Super important. And so I am still on my journey of setting boundaries. And one thing that's helped me a lot is Calendly, because you can set your schedule. And so when I send out the thing, it'll just say, oh no, she's not available on Tuesday and Thursday. So that's what popped up in my head is, if anybody out there is oh, I could never tell people no right now, start looking for that software, start looking for those tools, those nonverbal tools that you can use for right now. But let me tell you, at some point, you're going to have to vocalize those boundaries, but we'll get there when we get there. In the meantime, keep listening to Absolutely Not. I now will open it to the floor. So anybody that has questions or comments for us, let's see what you have to say. I'm going to read the chat. And if you'd like, you can come off mute. Farzin is in the hot seat right now. He knows everything about anything on the planet. Look at his face. So please feel free to ask me anything. Hi, everybody said hi. Oh, they love your headphones.
Oh, nice. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Openly state they do not have policies to protect, right? And this is why you have to ask those questions in their interview. Because what if you ask, hey, how's your, what happens if somebody reports discrimination and they say, ooh, we don't have any policy or procedures for that at all. Like, cool.
Huge red flag, yeah.
Oh, and Icarus reference I first saw. This is a great comment. Yeah, Icarus. Oh my gosh. Icarus pops in my head a lot. So that's probably not your fault, Parsi.
The image of like him sprawled out, like it's from a painting, I think, or with like the wings melting and him falling, like his arms and legs kind of like, you know, that always sticks with me. But yeah, you definitely can fly too close to the sun.
And you don't want that, because then you fall flat and then you can't help anyone, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. I do have some. Oh, somebody has a question. Exactly. And people just watching him and doing nothing. Oh my God. What do you suggest in handling workplace issues between white women in leadership and usually Black women who are perceived as a threat? Ooh.
What do you suggest in handling workplace issues? That's so tough. Michelle, this is why I think I started critical equity consulting with this orientation toward equity in systems, and leading with equity and inclusion over individual sort of action. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. I'm a firm believer in that systems and environments influence behavior. So if you have an inclusive and equitable culture in your organization, that's going to lead to better better sort of behavioral outcomes. With workplace issues between white women in leadership and usually Black women, I mean, kind of there's a sort of what is it, relational aggression issue where, like, you're within your own specific one identity group, right, which is you're a woman, and there might be some tension there because there's this one notion where if I had to work hard in this particular identity group, so should you. And there's also a racial dimension to it. So I would, assess the trust level depending on like how the conversation is. If it's like something that can be on an interpersonal level, what I recommend is first, like, assessing the trust level, assessing the power situation, where do you stand, kind of the pros and cons. What do you stand to gain or lose with this conversation? And so with that understanding, like, where is your trust level? So if you have a much more candid sort of an open relationship, that's something that you can kind of go and directly have that conversation with, and then you do this intervention thing where you set the tone, have the conversation, use it as a learning opportunity, and ask for behavioral change, and hopefully they'll listen and kind of make that change. If it's something much more entrenched and deep seated, obviously you want to you want to kind of create an environment. You want to be part of a positive environment. So what I typically, and it may be a privilege, it may be a luxury, but I usually go with the mantra of assuming good intent, and then kind of owning the impact of what I say, especially if I'm in a position of power or responsibilities, like as a man, for example, in a situation. Or so there might be some blind spots, so there might be some unawareness to those issues. Maybe no one's raised those issues, with them. Likely they have, especially now in society. There's a lot of awareness of these things. Um, so, you know, you can, and this is completely up to you. Like if you're a black woman or a woman of color going to address these things, um, this is completely up to you. You're in the ownership seat here, and don't do anything that's going to jeopardize your survival and mental health. But like, you can go in and find some common, open up the conversation, find some common ground, and then express your level of concern. And so, just like you've had a rough go at it, because if you're a woman in the workplace, you have not had it easy. There's no buts about it usually. And then kind of open up the conversation to being like, there are different dimensions to being, there are different intersections in being a woman of color and than a white woman, right? And so having that conversation may have yield some positive outcomes. Oh, hello. And so it's something that you have to determine. What's best for you. I don't always recommend, if you're in a position of like down power, like you're not in the position of power, to consistently shake things up, because that affects you, right? You have to determine, do I have the capacity to do this? You are not obligated. You are not obligated to go into a work environment, learn your job, and then have to change the culture to reflect you, right? That's why it's a systems approach I always take. So I'm training leaders in understanding these situations. So it's a much more like different approach than the typical like coaching thing. But I mean, if you last thing I will say about that is that there is an unexplored power in the workplace in numbers. And so building connections and building networking and finding people who are experiencing the same things as you are, and going at it with a much more united sort of front about it, like is one of those things that you don't ever see in the workplace. It's always the individual versus the institution. Um, Join your affinity group if you have one in the workplace and raise these things up. Maybe there might be an opportunity there. But again, like these things are so difficult in this country because we don't have, I think union participation in this country is at 7% or something like that. Very, very low compared to places. You don't have many avenues. So if the conversation doesn't work, if it's entrenched, you could try building relationships in networks and try and, in a more unified fashion, basically raising these issues. And, you could even write a letter and put signatures behind it. But yeah, no, it's tough. I think though, if you are having the conversation, it's a good idea to figure out a way to find common ground, build trust, like, understand the issues, with women, being a woman in the workplace, and then kind of raise the other dimension. So I hope that helps. I mean, that's a roundabout.
Yes, thank you. No, it is. That's great. I'm sorry, I don't want to share my camera right now, but turn on my camera. But I found out about you through LinkedIn. I've been seeing some of your posts, and that's why I came to this session. And so, yeah, I knew about why you founded your company, and I'm really impressed. So I appreciate it. And yeah, I have been successful with some women. I'm in academia, in my office, where I've been like one-on-one and said, hey, what is it? And I realized I somehow, just being Black and excellent, and I'm an immigrant's child too, so I'm an overachiever. Just being myself makes them feel ashamed. That's it. It's just that I have brought up questions and done things in a different way that have been novel and have been profitable for our organization that they wish they had done, but they didn't. And so I'm having to do a lot of coaching with them and mentoring and, reverse, just, it's tough. But yeah, thank you. I'm committed. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I am so sorry that burden is on your shoulders, right? We are trying to build a world or build a society or build institutions where you don't have to worry about that. Like, these things are much more out in the open. These processes are much more out in the open. And I appreciate you kind of tying it back to the threat concept of specifically existing in a lived experience or a space of identity where you can do no right. You will always be viewed as a threat. And that is not, and I will say this from personal experience, is that there are there are situations where, like, almost whatever you do is it feels like a lose-lose situation, right? Like, you can overachieve, you can underachieve. You're always set to certain standards. And if those standards, those shift based on the threat level of the people in power, right? Like, so if somebody, feels threatened by you, because there's this whole thing about, like, white supremacy kind of creates this culture of you are at the top and somebody's threatening your position, and so you do whatever you have to do to maintain that position. Even you make contradictions out of it, and then you try and justify those contradictions through propaganda and garbage, right? So I'm sorry that happens to you, and I'm sorry that that's happening everywhere. So the only remedy to that, I can only say, is our collective approach to breaking down and making people aware of these processes and breaking these systems down. We want to dismantle white supremacy, and we will replace it with systems that are inclusive and equitable. So no one group is dominating. No one group's values are in their culture is dominating, right? And so, the more we democratize, the less we have these hierarchies of power. And so, we're trying to kind of move into that situation, and it is the burden on the shoulders of women, people of color, individuals with disabilities, especially our Black, Brown, and Indigenous siblings, people with disabilities, people who are non-binary, very sexual orientations. So, it's a lot of ways. It shouldn't be our responsibility. It shouldn't be the responsibility of those who've been marginalized in these situations to have to do that, because they don't have the power. The power relies with those at the top, and that's traditionally wealthy, able-bodied white men. They have the responsibility, but when you have power, you don't want to give it up. So that's an unfortunate thing. But, like, with a systems approach, I think with what we're doing it's going to hopefully change things. So thank you, Michelle.
I am so sorry that I have a co-host here with me today, but you're amazing.
Oh.
He is not having the best day.
Yeah.
If you could give me 1 second, I do have a question for you before I slip right out of here. Why do you stay in this field of building inclusive and equitable organizations, and kind of starting your own business? Why do you stay in this field even though it's heart-wrenching and it's difficult to do?
Sometimes I don't even know. I'm good at it, I guess. I don't know. Like, it's part of combination of my educational background was in identity politics. It was in nationalism. It was in like issues of tensions with when it comes to identity, and so it was a natural transition into the DEI work. That coupled with just like a series of irritations in the workplace, and just like my lived experiences just extrapolated it, and it's just like I just have like, and to be 100% candid about this, I just have so many frustrations that I want to get out. Like, and I know a lot of people have them as well. Like, I'm tired, right? Like I'm exhausted by the way the labor is viewed in this country and identity is viewed in this country. And so, um, I think because of that, I'm not to toot my own horn, but I'm good at it. I'm finding like people relate with what I have to say, and I'm good at um, building processes, and so I have I'm an ENTP, so I'm like kind of big picture sort of oriented. So my next big thing, my next big um, big area that I want to explore is this marriage of liberation of your identity and then liberation of your labor. Like so, the economic plus the racial social justice, right? So, and that requires us to build equitable systems where power is shared, decision making is shared, and so those systems are much more conducive to good diversity, equity, inclusion programs than very rigid hierarchical systems. So that's what I really like am looking to explore. I've studied history, like I can do these trainings, and like I know how these issues show up in the workplace in micro kind of environments where like interpersonal interactions and things like that. I'm good at that, but I really just like my whole thing is like I want to build a better organization so that DEI isn't so hard. DEI is all bandages. It's like you're trying to kind of overcompensate for these like terrible small like not small, like I don't want the term micro and small is bad, these types of interpersonal interactions, and so these biases and these like power differentials in the workplace, whereas like if you build a good system, inclusive system, equitable system, like all those things are so much easier. Like it's a conversation to be had as opposed to it's embedded into the structure. So that's what's driving me right now. And I don't know. I don't just maybe one day I'll stop and do something else. But it's going good so far.
Right. And I hope you don't ever have to get to that day where you have to stop. You're doing an amazing job. So many people in this chat are just praising everything and all of the work that you've done and even what you've said today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, one, and your experiences and why you continue to be in this field. Do you have any last golden nuggets before we wrap it up for today?
Don't let the burden of bad system, don't internalize the burden of bad systems. So don't let problematic environments convince you that you're the problem, right? Stop internalizing it. Like we are more than our individual self. We have power in collective groups. We are social beings. This individualistic approach to all of these things has harmed us irreparably, almost. So we have to shift our mindset to find power in the collective, to find power in our shared experiences, to find power in collective action. So take some lessons from different cultures on this, and then and because of that, stop internalizing it. You're doing damage to yourself, and you're not gonna change anything with that mindset.
Stop internalizing it. I love it. A lot of people don't have the words they need to kind of stop internalizing it. And I hope from this session alone that anybody listening out there is able to get the words they need. The systems that are in place, the cage that is around you, the ownership of that cage, boundaries, gaslighting, dismissive behavior, toxic environments, the ability to ask these questions before entering the doors. please take the words that you need away from it to stop internalizing it. It's not you, it's the system. And it's really important to tell the system that every single day.
Scream at it.
Yeah, it's like, it's you, not me.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to read some things from the chat real quick. Everybody's just singing your praises. So nice to see and hear you. Thank you for the sessions and the posts that you all do. You received profound advice. Someone said, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming tonight. Once again, this has been absolutely not. My name is Katrina Stroll. I have a screaming baby in the background. My special guest today was Farzin Farzad, the amazing person that he is. Please reach out to him if you need help with boundaries or are you thinking about creating an inclusive and equitable environment. He can definitely help you with that. But thank you so much for coming today, and we'll see you next time.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you all for the kind words as well.
Oh, bye.